God calls you to leave, it is never without a purpose. He does not ask you to step away from something unless He has already prepared something greater ahead. But too often we hesitate. We cling to the familiar even when it no longer serves us. We hold on to people, places, and situations that were only meant to be temporary. Yet deep down, we feel the stirring in our hearts. That quiet whisper, that persistent nudge, that undeniable feeling that it is time to go. That is God speaking. And the Bible, when God told Abraham to leave his homeland, He didn't give him a full map or a detailed plan. He simply said, "Go to the land I will show you." Abraham had a choice. He could have stayed where he was, comfortable and secure in what he knew. But he chose to obey. He trusted that where God was leading him was far greater than what he was leaving behind. And because of that faith, he became the father of many nations. God is calling you too. Maybe He's telling you to leave behind old habits that are keeping you from growing. Maybe He's urging you to walk away from a relationship that is pulling you away from Him. Maybe He's asking you to leave a job that is draining your soul because He has something better for you. Whatever it is, when God speaks, we must listen. But here's the challenge. Many of us don't want to leave. We make excuses. We say, "Lord, I'll go, but not yet." Or, "What if I fail? What if I don't know what to do?" We wait for the perfect conditions, the perfect signs, the perfect moment. But faith does not work that way. If you wait for everything to be perfect before you move, God doesn't show you the whole path because He wants you to trust Him step by step. That's why Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." If God is calling you to leave, He has already gone ahead of you. He has already prepared the way. Your job is to follow. Leaving does not mean losing. It means surrendering your plans for His. It means trusting that He knows what is best, and when you do, you will find that what He has for you is far greater than anything you could have imagined. So today, if you feel that stirring in your heart, if you feel God calling you to step out, do not ignore it. Do not let fear hold you back. Take that step. Trust in His plan. Because when God calls you to leave, He is preparing to bless you beyond measure. Faith is not just believing in God, it is trusting Him enough to obey. It is one thing to say, "I believe God has a plan for me," but it is another to step out when He calls. Obedience is the true test of faith. It is easy to trust God when life is comfortable, when everything is going well, when the path ahead is clear. But real faith is proven in the moments when God asks us to leave the familiar, to step into the unknown, to follow Him without knowing all the details. Look at the life of Abraham. God told him to leave his homeland, his family, and everything he had ever known to go to a place that He would show him. Abraham did not have a road map. He did not have all the answers. He only had a promise from God, and yet he obeyed. He stepped out in faith, not because he saw the whole picture, but because he trusted the one who was leading him. That is the kind of faith God desires from us. Many people struggle with obedience because they want control. They want guarantees before they move. They want to know exactly how things will work out before they take the first step. But faith does not operate on human understanding. Faith is trusting that God sees what we cannot see, that He knows what we do not know. If we could see the whole picture, we wouldn't need faith at all. There are times when God will call you to leave behind something you have relied on for years. He may ask you to walk away from a job that provides financial security, from a relationship that feels comfortable but is not His best for you, from a lifestyle that is holding you back from your purpose. And when that moment comes, you will have to decide, Will you stay where you are, clinging to what is familiar, or will you trust him and obey? Delayed obedience is still disobedience. Many people feel God stirring their hearts, calling them to something greater, but they hesitate. They say, Lord, I will follow you, but let me take care of this first. Or I will go when I feel ready. But you will never feel fully ready. You will never have every answer. That is why obedience must come first, even before understanding. God is calling you to trust him. He is calling you to take that step, even if it feels uncertain. The Bible tells us in Corinthians 5:7-4, we walk by faith, not by sight. That means we don't wait until everything is clear before we move. We move because we trust the one who is leading us. If God is calling you, do not hesitate. Do not let fear hold you back. Step out in faith, knowing that obedience is the key to unlocking his promises. Where he is leading you is far greater than anything you are leaving behind. Trust him, follow him, and watch how he moves in your life. Fear is one of the greatest tools the enemy uses to keep us from stepping into God's plan. It whispers doubts into our minds, convincing us that we are not ready, that we are not strong enough, that we might fail. Fear tells us to stay where we are because the unknown is too risky, too uncertain. But fear is not from God. The Bible says in 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. If fear is holding you back, it is not God speaking. It is the enemy trying to keep you from your destiny. There are moments in life when we feel God calling us to step out, to leave behind something that is no longer good for us. It could be a toxic relationship, a job that drains our soul, a mindset that keeps us trapped in insecurity and doubt. Deep down, we know that God is telling us to move forward, but fear rises up. We think about everything that could go wrong. We wonder, what if I fail? What if I make the wrong decision? What if I lose everything? But let me tell you this. Fear is a liar. Fear wants you to believe that your security is in what you can see and what is familiar. But true security is not found in people, jobs, or circumstances. True security is found in God. And when he calls you to leave something behind, he is already preparing something greater ahead. Think about the Israelites. They had been in slavery in Egypt for over 400 years. When God sent Moses to lead them out, they saw miracles. The Red Sea parted, manna fell from heaven, water flowed from a rock. Yet even after witnessing God's power, when things got difficult, fear took over. They said, we should go back to Egypt. Imagine that. They were willing to return to slavery because they were afraid of the unknown. They preferred the chains they were used to over the freedom that required faith. Many of us do the same thing. We hold on to things that are keeping us in bondage because they feel safe. We resist change because it requires trust. But God is saying, do not be afraid, for I am with you. He is calling you to step out, to believe that what he has for you is better than what you are afraid to leave behind. Fear may not disappear overnight, but faith is stronger than fear. When Peter stepped out of the boat to walk on water, he only sank when he took his eyes off Jesus. The moment he focused on the wind and waves, fear overtook him. But as long as he kept his eyes on Christ, he did the impossible. If God is calling you to leave something behind, don't let fear keep you stuck. Trust in his plan. Walk forward in faith. And remember, fear will always try to hold you back, but God is calling you forward. Leaving is never easy. It requires courage, it requires trust, it requires faith in something greater than what we can see. There are moments in life when God calls us to walk away from situations, relationships, and habits that no longer serve His purpose for us. But too often we resist. We hesitate. We tell ourselves that it is better to stay where we are because the unknown is too frightening. But God never asks us to leave something unless He has something greater waiting ahead. Think about the story of Lot and his family. God sent angels to warn them that destruction was coming to the city of Sodom and they had to leave. But as they ran, Lot's wife looked back, and in that moment she turned into a pillar of salt. Why did she look back? Because her heart was still tied to what she was leaving behind. She couldn't fully trust that what was ahead was better than what she had known. And because of that, she lost everything. How many of us do the same? God tells us to move on, but we keep looking back. We hold on to things that were only meant to be part of our past. We stay in relationships that pull us away from Him. We cling to jobs that drain our spirit because we are afraid of what comes next. We refuse to let go of habits and patterns that keep us from growing. And yet we wonder why we feel stuck, why we feel unfulfilled. Leaving is not easy, but it is necessary. There are doors God wants to open in your life, but He cannot open them until you walk away from the ones He has closed. There are blessings waiting for you, but you will never experience them if you refuse to step forward. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply letting go. Jesus Himself taught this principle when He said, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Luke 9, verse 62. If we are constantly looking back, we cannot move forward. If we are always holding on to the past, we cannot embrace the future God has planned. But make no mistake, leaving is not losing. It may feel painful at first. It may feel like sacrifice, but in God's kingdom, obedience always leads to greater blessings. Abraham left his homeland and became the father of many nations. The disciples left their fishing nets and became fishers of men. Paul left his old life behind and became one of the greatest messengers of the gospel. What is God asking you to leave today? Whatever it is, trust Him. Walk in faith. Do not let fear hold you back. Where He is leading you is greater than what you are leaving behind. Step forward. Do not look back. And watch how God moves in your life. When God calls you to leave, He is not just taking you away from something, He is leading you toward something greater. Too often we see leaving as a loss. We focus on what we are giving up rather than what God is preparing ahead. But God never asks us to walk away without a purpose. When He calls us to leave, it is because He has a plan far beyond what we can see. Throughout the Bible, we see this truth repeated again and again. When God led the Israelites out of Egypt, they were not just escaping slavery, they were being led to the promised land. But because they focused on what they left behind instead of trusting what was ahead, many of them never entered into the blessings God had prepared. They longed for Egypt, forgetting that God had something far greater for them. How many of us do the same? We resist change because we are afraid. We hesitate to leave because we cannot yet see where God is taking us. But faith is trusting in God's direction even when we do not have all the answers. When Jesus called His disciples, He told them, "Come, follow me." He did not give them a detailed plan. He did not explain every step. He simply asked them to trust Him. And because they obeyed, they walked into a purpose far greater than anything they could have imagined. Peter, James, and John were just fishermen. But by leaving their nets behind, they became part of the greatest story ever told. There are times when God will ask you to step into the unknown. Maybe he is leading you away from a job, a relationship, a comfort zone. Maybe he is calling you to something greater, but you are afraid to let go of what is familiar. Do not let fear keep you from receiving what God has for you. If he is calling you to leave, it is because he has something better ahead. God does not just call people to leave. He equips them for what comes next. He never asks us to step out in faith without providing for us along the way. When he led the Israelites through the wilderness, he provided manna from heaven, water from a rock, and guidance by a pillar of fire. When Jesus sent his disciples out, he told them not to worry about what they would eat or wear because their Father in heaven would provide. And he does the same for us today. So do not be afraid to let go. Do not resist the change that God is bringing into your life. What he has planned for you is far greater than anything you are leaving behind. Trust him. Follow where he leads. Because when you walk in obedience, you will discover that every sacrifice, every step of faith leads you closer to the life God has prepared for you. When God tells you to leave, he is not asking you to walk alone. He is not sending you into the unknown without his presence, his strength, and his guidance. He goes before you, he walks beside you, and he remains with you every step of the way. The journey of obedience is not a lonely road. It is a road where God's presence becomes more real than ever before. So many people hesitate to leave because they are afraid of being alone. They cling to familiar places, familiar people, and familiar routines because they fear what might happen if they step out in faith. But the truth is, there is no safer place to be than in the will of God. When he calls you to move, he also promises to sustain you. His word says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Joshua 1:9. That means wherever God is leading you, he is already there. Think about Moses. He was called to leave behind his comfortable life in Midian and return to Egypt to lead God's people to freedom. It was a daunting task, and Moses was afraid. He doubted his ability. He questioned whether he was the right person for the job. But God did not ask Moses to rely on his own strength. He told him, "I will be with you." That was all Moses needed. And that is all you need. If God is calling you to leave something behind, do not focus on your own limitations. Focus on his presence, his power, and his faithfulness. The enemy wants you to believe that stepping out in faith means stepping into loneliness, but that is a lie. Some doors must close in order for God to open better ones. Some relationships must end so that God can bring the right people into your life. Some seasons must end so that new ones can begin. When you walk in obedience, you may have to leave certain things behind, but you will never be left without God's presence. There are moments in life when we must walk through valleys, through times of uncertainty, through seasons of transition. But even in those moments, God is there. He is the God who never forsakes his people. He is the good shepherd who leads his sheep. He is the father who walks with his children. If God is telling you to leave, do not let fear hold you back. Do not let the enemy convince you that you are alone. Trust that wherever God calls you, his presence will go before you. And when you take that step of faith, you will see his hand guiding you, his peace sustaining you, and his love surrounding you. You will look back one day and realize that every step of obedience led you deeper into his purpose and closer to the life he has prepared for you.